Thank you so much for being on board the transatlantic. You are one of the names that I've been chasing, and your ocean it's fascinating to say at least, because your journey is so different from any other journey. So I'm so thankful to have you here at Transatlantic.
Oh, look, it's great to be here. Yes, I have come from a long way away. I've been crisscrossing around the oceans of the world for some time. So,
okay, man. So I would say everybody that your ocean is remarkable. Let's get into it. Let me cross it. First question.
Perfect.
Okay. The black hole found on the island of South Andros is a large isolated column about 47 meters deep and formed by chemical erosion. Now, its depth replicates the condition of the ocean billions and billions of years ago. So research used this portion of the ocean as a blueprint to study how our planets could evolve, or how our planets look like back then. Now, if you were to leave a blueprint on the state of advertising to the future generations, what kind of conditions you would recreate? And what would be the essential element for advertising to prosper at the top of your list?
Yeah, that's a big question. But no, look, I mean, for me, I think, some of the blueprints of what works were founded in advertising, back in the 60s in particular, by agencies like DDB. And I think the blueprint is a focus on talent. And I've talked a lot over my career about sort of that you can't teach passion. You can, so I search for passionate people. So I think what I would look for is I'd create an environment where passionate people can come in and just be their most passionate about solving business problems. And I think the other thing I've found is I discovered probably 10 years ago now that I think there's a lot of creative people that are kept out of our industry because sometimes they can't afford it. They don't come from the right socioeconomic background. If you live in New York, they can't afford to live in New York, all of those things. Right. So I would love to create an environment where anyone with a great mind and passion can just generate incredible solutions, regardless of your background. And as part of that, I've actually created a program within our company called Ignite, which specifically goes and finds people who haven't gone through traditional training, advertising schools, etc., and just gives them a chance to come in and solve problems in a creative way. So I think that for me, that'd be it. It'd be like an environment that allowed for diversity and passion, getting people who think agnostically about just give them a problem and they'll solve it however is appropriate, and then creating a space where that people feel like they can experiment and fail when they have to, and because I think failure is an important part of learning. It's not going to keep failing over and over again at the same thing. So yeah, I think that would be my blueprint, I think.
It's such an interesting blueprint. And the last topic you touch upon, the fact that, it doesn't, sometimes even if you do have talents, your condition, the environment you are in, and maybe you don't have a family that supports you. You can't afford to go live in New York City, and maybe you can't make it in advertising, right? And it's so true that, right? Sometimes I consider myself very lucky, not just because I found the right path. Sometimes it was a random way of finding, but because sometimes I call myself a fake rebel. I have always my family covering my ass, honestly,
Yeah.
It's for me to be risky, to take risk, to say yeah, I want to fail, because there was always a safe mattress behind me.
Yeah. And I think that's for me, because I worked for DDB for a long time, and Bill Bernbach always said, I can teach advertising, but I can't teach talent and passion. And for me, that's the thing. If you find people and they haven't had the opportunity, you can teach them how to do advertising, but you want to be able to, you want to create the opportunity for them to come in and just be them and be creative. And, I've had so many great moments where I've been able to take a risk. Like I remember at JWT, I hired a young girl there who was a sculptor, but she was very, the work she was doing was it was a bit political, and everything sort of made a bit of a statement. And
Right.
I just liked the way she thought. And I was like, I think you'd be very good at advertising. I know that seems weird. And she's like, I love it. I'd love to try advertising. And she came in and she just took her thought process, but applied it to solving business problems.
Beautiful.
And it was amazing. So I love that bit of it, because I think those people are out there, but maybe not exposed or given the opportunity to
Yeah.
try. Yeah.
Definitely. Good, man. Second question. By measuring the amount of remaining radiocarbon in ocean waters at different depths and in different places around the world, we know that the deep Pacific hold the ocean's oldest waters, which have been out of contact with the atmosphere for about 1,000 years before the mix to the surface again. Now, bridging the aging concept to our industry, this is a big concept for us. How do you determine time? What's old and what's new? And in the end, is there such a thing as timeless creativity?
Yeah, to me, I think it's the difference between trend and timeless. And I think there are definitely trends, and we're always going through different trends, and it might be there was a stage I remember where advertising was all very humorous, and that's the approach it took. Now it's a bit different; it's a bit more purpose-based, etc. But I think the timelessness comes from, excuse me, timelessness comes from work that's built around a human truth, and I think that has always been true. The best work throughout advertising history has this core of a human truth that the work is reacting to, and that to me is what makes it timeless. I think you can look. I still look back at some of the early work that agencies like BBH or AMV, when David Abbott was still there, and it's beautifully timeless because the insight is still true, and
Right.
people change, but not that much at their core. So I think that's what bridges it all. And if you go in there, you're looking for that sort of authentic and timeless insight, then the work is going to be timeless.
However, there is some work that's we've done as a creative like 10, 15 years ago, and it wouldn't be marketable right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I found myself even like pulling out pieces of my portfolio.
That
were like, I had to be honest, like there was a campaign that was very well received like 15 years ago. It won a lot of awards. It was a defining moment for me in my career. I had to pull it out of my portfolio because it wouldn't be acceptable or even like, considered at the same like level nowadays. And that's what I think for me, like define what's old, you know what I mean? There is a trend, as you say, I agree, but there is also like things that nowadays they were amazing back then, but they wouldn't fly.
Well, I think especially work that is maybe sort of following fashions of or trends of music or design, etc. Like for me, I remember like viscerally reacting to the iPod work when it first came out, with the people dancing on the colored backgrounds. So beautiful, and it was just the simplicity. But I think if you did that again now, as to your point, it's done. Like you can't but I always felt like that work had a really healthy dose of contemporary sort of fashionable music and trend in it, which is probably what dates it. But then you compare it to, I mean, it's funny, when I was at JWT, I'd been working, I worked on Rolex, and Rolex has been a client of JWT's, when it was still JWT, for 85 years. But you could almost look at the work from the beginning to the end, and it was always the same. Like there was that sort of core truth in there. So yeah, it's definitely it's almost a decision, I guess, and it depends on what.
It's a very fascinating thing, like you can see in other field. I was like watching this interview a couple, I think, I don't remember who was interviewing who, but I remember saying that after Reservoir Dogs from Quentin Tarantino came out in 1992, everybody, it was so fresh and so new and rewrote the rule of screenplaying that everybody start trying to write monologue that way. And now, like, you know, is accepted, and now it's like, you know, he opened the door for, like, he carved the path for many other, like, you know, directors. But back then it was something so fresh and so new, like the iPads, like, you know, say that we react to it in a way that is almost the first time that you see something that truly like break through, and that's something totally new. And it's me, you know?
But it's so interesting because you compare someone like Tarantino, who I love. I mean, I just love watching his films, but some to like Scorsese, and you'd almost say he's had such consistency from the very beginning.
For like,
forever. Like, but you know, he was as good at the beginning as he was as he is now, and there's a.
It's so funny that you mentioned Scorsese. So there was, I was watching Scorsese, and he says something really funny about this. He say, when I first started working in a like, you know, as a filmmaker, I show after a year and a half, I show what I did like to Cassavetes, John Cassavetes.
Yeah.
And he came to me and say, man, it's like, you know, Martin, I think like for the past year and a half, you just work on a piece of junk. This is like not good at all. I think you just need to do something that is personal to you. And so from that moment on, Martin Scorsese started developing, like, you know, his own autobiographical storytelling. If you see, like, you know, he was a kid born like in Manhattan and little. You know, he knew. So he adopted the same approach that Hemingway adopted, like, you know, in literature, which is like only write about what you know and what you
tell the stories that mean something to you. Yeah.
So anyway, that's so. Yeah. We can talk like so long about this. Anyway, talking about literature, the third question: Beachwood is a short science fiction story by Stephen King, and it was first published in Weird Tales in 1984. It is set as an unspecified time in distant future. Among the few clues to the date is the passing reference that the last of the Beach Boys have died 8,000 years previously. The story recounts the catastrophic crash landing of a spacecraft of an uncharted planet made entirely of sand, no ocean. During one of the public readings of the novel, someone asked Mr. King, "Why do you choose to write about such gruesome subjects all the time?" And he say, "Why do you assume that I have a choice?" Now, do you believe in fate tapping us over the shoulder and making us do things? Were you drawn to advertising by an invisible force, or you just bump into it?
It's funny. I actually have a pretty strong point of view on this, and it's partly because the way I was brought up was very much like make it happen for yourself. Like nothing's going to just happen for you. And my father always used to say to me, "Luck is when opportunity meets preparation." There's no such thing as luck. When you put yourself in the environment and you're prepared, and the opportunity comes along, that's luck. And it's really stuck with me about being very deliberate about the choices I've made in my career. And I was kind of blessed in the sense that I knew I wanted to be in advertising from the time I was 13. It was just crazy. I don't know why. I think I'm almost embarrassed to admit, but I feel like I was watching Darren Stevens on Bewitched on television going, that looks like such a great job. Like, you're just coming up with ideas.
Let me tell you something before. Let me tell you something, like right here. I interviewed Jimmy Smith.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and he told me the same thing. He actually got into advertising because of that TV show.
Yeah, same. Because I used to watch it, and it was just like, that looks like the funnest job. So it was interesting. So from the age of about 13, I kind of started creating the environment where I would get into advertising. You know, I did work experience during the school holidays at a couple of advertising agencies. I studied advertising, all of that. So I very deliberately kind of got into it. And again, I'm sort of blessed in that, here I am 34 years into it, I guess, and I still love it. Like I've never had that moment where I'm like, oh, I want to do something else, or I don't love this anymore. And I, I think I had always set sort of audacious goals for myself in my career. Like I think I used to sort of like push myself, and I don't know what was driving that. It's probably my parents, but I wanted to be an ECD of a advertising agency by the time I was 30. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I just started sort of manipulating my career to become that.
Right.
I mean, some really dumb things, like I was working at Saatchi in Sydney at the time, and I started dressing differently. Like I would dress, what creatives are like.
Awesome. And
yeah,
you remind me. So I say this once already, like in another episode. Jerry Seininger, before writing Catch the Rye, wanted to have so much and so hard to be published by the New Yorker. However, the style of the writing style of the New Yorker back then, it wasn't really matching his style. So what he did, he tweaked his style. Even if he didn't like it, he tweaked his own style in a way that could be published by the New Yorker. And once published, then he got the freedom to become Jerry Seininger.
To bring his own style in,
You like dress in a certain kind of way just to get to that level. And
well, and I remember like my friends in the creative department giving me a hard time, or like, oh, job interview, Matt, and like, because I'd be wearing a jacket and stuff like that. But it actually kind of made me seem more like a creative leader, so that when I eventually got the opportunity, people went, oh yeah, well, of course he can do it, like he's been doing it. So, and I've been very deliberate about those kind of choices throughout. So I sort of believe less in fate and more in preparation.
Let me tell you, man, this is an amazing remarkable tips that our audience can, like, our younger audience can actually just like grasp. And,
well, I hope so.
All as a gem, because we do work also like in a business that is like based on perception, and it's the way like people perceive you, and like of course, as a leader. I remember, and I will always say this, I shouldn't say this, but I remember I did this like little experiment back then. In 1997, I was living in London. And I say to myself, I'm gonna go on the tube, and I'm gonna dress like very like, jacket and tie one day with no tickets. And the second day, I'm gonna take the tube with no ticket, pay no ticket, but dress like, literally like, like a punk.
Yeah.
The day I was dressed jacket and tie, they didn't give me a fee, even though I didn't have a ticket. The second day I was dressed like a punk. And that proved that point.
Yeah.
Like, they are completely like, affected by what they see and the perception.
Yeah, it's totally true. No, it's funny. I had a creative team who worked for me at DDB, and they were both kind of, one was a surfer, like very like laid back, and the other one was, they're both kind of two young laid back guys. And a couple of people made the comment to me in the agency, they seem lazy, like, because I'll go into their office and they're always just like, feet up on the desk. And I was like, that's just not true at all. Like, these guys are amazing. And, as someone who works in creative, we know that it doesn't matter how you sit or where you sit, your brain is always thinking. So but I didn't want them to be judged like that, because I thought that's so unfair. So I said to them, I went to them and I said, look, there's this impression, but I'll tell you how to fix it. Just get a whole lot of layouts and things that you're working on and stick them all over the walls, so that when people walk in, they go, oh, wow, look at all this. And that's what they did. And, but to your point, it's just like, it's a facade.
It's a facade, absolutely.
Yeah, they're the same people, but the impression was different.
It was like, I think it was Ben Affleck in Boiler Room. It was like an amazing like movie, Boiler Room, with Ben Affleck. They say like act as if.
Yeah.
Like the like I would say like the motto of the advertising. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funny stories, man. Fourth question. Nobel Prize author Scorsese, I don't know if I pronounce right, but he's an Australian author. He old Australian and South African citizenship. He embodies the transatlantic spirits, having crossed the ocean multiple times throughout his life. Coetzee moved to the United Kingdom in 1962 and worked as a computer programmer for IBM in London. Coetzee's experience in England were later recounted in Youth, his second volume of fictionalized memories. There is a quote from him that can't leave my mind, and it goes like this: "There seemed nothing to do but live." How do you recount your youth in advertising? I guess you already talked about this. Did you find it hard to focus on climbing to the top? And I understood that it was almost like a very good process for you. But was ever a moment in your career when you got distracted and you had a period of time where you were not focused at all and advertising wasn't your priority?
I mean, there were moments where I felt incredibly challenged and can I stick at this? And to be honest, the one of the first moments happened when I was young in advertising. I'd been working maybe 3 years for Ogilvy in Perth, and you know we'd won Agency of the Year twice in a row. That very year, that third year, I had won Commercial of the Year. Like I was 23 or something. But then the agency went bankrupt, and I got fired, and I didn't have a job. They actually fired me before they went bankrupt. So we didn't know the agency was going bankrupt, and I just got called to the managing director's office, and he said, "Look, we have to let you go." And I was like devastated because I thought, well, I've done everything. Like I've won all these awards, and and I remember, I was young, still young, but I was living with my parents, and I went home and I cried to my parents, like, maybe I'm not very good at this. Like, I just don't understand. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks later that the news came out that the agency had gone into bankruptcy. And what they'd actually done is they'd fired the people that they wanted to make sure got their payouts first. So I guess their favorite people, because once they went into bankruptcy, all the money was controlled by the courts. So I actually they were looking after me in a way because I got all my final salary, etc. But that moment, it really shook me because I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it was actually one of a Sydney agency who kind of picked me up and recognized the work I'd done and said, like, you're amazing, keep going. And it sort of got me out of that moment. But
it's very tough for everybody, like, for young people, for like people our age, like to be to maintain that kind of confidence, because it's very easy to break through the wall because we're fragile, very fragile. It's not that because we're creative we are fragile. I don't buy into like the story. As a human being, we're fragile. So we, like, actually one of your, like, an OC, Charlize Theron, I remember saying that, like, as an actor, she says, like, actor are walking insecurities. Just like, and I think like creative, but human beings are the same. So whenever like something like this happened, and this happened to all of us, happened to all of us, it's a badge of honor, right? I see it as a badge of honor, as a mark, like, it's very hard to believe in yourself, to keep believing in yourself. You always start believing in yourself,
because it's such a personal commitment.
God.
I mean, we're putting our own creativity on show, and when someone judges you and says, no, not good enough, you can't help but take it personally. But I mean, the thing that I've learned, and that's happened a couple of times since, but the thing that I've learned, that even the bad times make me a better leader, make me a better creative person. I mean, I think if I hadn't been fired myself, I wouldn't, I've had to fire people because of course that's part of the job, but hopefully it taught me compassion, and it taught me what to say to help somebody not give up on their dreams, because I think a lot of people can feel that fragility. So yeah, it's weird that now I kind of roll with the punches, and bad stuff happens, and I'm like, okay, I'll pivot.
so admirable. And like, this is so useful, like, you know, for everybody that wants to get into advertising, but also like the eye in advertising, because I think it's a big moment. It's a breakthrough moment. Okay. Fifth question. Up to a quarter of fish in fish farms have stunted growth and float lifelessly at the surface of the tanks. Now, these fish are known as a dropouts. According to research by Royal Society Open Science, these fish exhibit behaviors and brain chemistry almost identical to those of very depressed people. So they are depressed fish. As a matter of fact, fish are capable of complex behavior, and the brain system has a lot of similarities with that of mammals, including humans. This is something I learned when I was researching for a short story I was writing. Now, I know that you say change industry, you start working in pharma. And my question is like, what is the single most interesting or fascinating or important discovery you've made since you get into the pharma world?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I've discovered is I think I've got a whole new belief in the power of creativity, because now I'm working in an industry, in the part of the industry where creativity saves lives. It makes a difference to people's life, and if you use it in the right way, like it, you know, it's not like I didn't love writing ads for Rolex or cars or, you know, making people laugh or whatever. But now when I'm working and we come up with a solution, we can genuinely change someone's life, and that is an incredible you know, it's a privilege and it's an opportunity. And what I've discovered in pharma is that it's there's been a lot of tradition over the years of like, well, that's how it's done, and I come in without knowing any of the traditions, to be honest, and I'm like, why wouldn't we do this? Why we should do that? And I just see these opportunities everywhere to really, for the brands I work on, to play like a meaningful role in someone's life and help improve their health. You know, I wrote a mantra for our company, which was to leave the world healthier than how we found it. So that, to me, that's our purpose. Come to work every day and try to leave the world healthier than you found it that day. And that's been such an amazing discovery and a joy to constantly look for those ways of like, how can I use this creativity that is free to me to make a difference in people's lives? And it's been incredible.
That's so incredible. I mean, you know, I had like, you know, my father was a pharmacist. So I grew up around like, you know, pharma. And then back then I worked for Digital Health. I worked for like, you know, Area 23. So I kind of like, you know, I touched pharma many times.
Yeah.
My inner problem is like, I'm deeply, obsessively idiosyncratic. So I suffer for idiosyncrasy. So like hypochondria.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my God. Like, so like, you know,
I'm dying.
I do know, but like, you know, that's what I'm about to do could literally like, you know, improve someone's life. But at the same time, as a creative, I found very hard for me to maintain that kind of balance in my head. And I don't know, I always ask, like every time I work on pharma, I always wonder, like, are there like hypochondriac people around that they are like me? Because you must like feel what I'm feeling right now, you know? And it only happens on certain kind of projects, like, you know, when they're really heavy projects, like, you know, but anyway, yeah, I mean, it's such a beautiful, fascinating world. And when you made that transition, it was visible, it was in the press. I was very happy for you. I didn't know at the time about this.
No, and I think what's happened, I mean, look, we've had great success, but I think when we kind of, you know, we win the best of show at the Andes, or, you know, we win at the one show or something with work out of health and wellness and pharma, people suddenly go, oh, I'd not thought of like that as an opportunity before. Right. So I'm happy that it's bringing more people in who are like, oh, okay, that looks interesting.
Which brings me to my sixth question, which is exactly about this. Once listen to this story. Once there was a country that was too small for all its inhabitants to fit inside all at once. This is the storyline of a novella called The Brief and Fragmenting Reign of Phil. The story focuses on the border dispute between the countries of Inner and Outer Horner, with an absurdist wit as playful as Monty Python's and a vision as dark as Samuel Beckett's. But in reality, the author, George Saunders, wanted to explore the human tendency to continuously, always divide the world into dualities. I can see the same happening in our business. There are creatives who work on farm advertising, and there are creatives who work in advertising. Now, do you think that in the near future, we will be able to consider those who work in these two different universes, just one big nation of creative? Or do you think that this divider is gonna stay in place as long as it could?
It's actually it's a really good question, because it's something that's I'm driving to make sure that we become one. And I'll tell you, because when I moved into pharma, and I remember saying to McCann when they hired me, like, I don't know this stuff. Like I didn't grow up, with a doctor as a father or anything. So I'm going to be out of my depth. And they're like, no, we don't care. We don't care. We just want someone who knows ideas. And I'm like, well, I know that. And I said, well, you're going to have to be tolerant, because I'm going to ask lots of questions. And what I realized is that it's intimidating for about 3 months. Like when you first get in and you hear this terminology and you're like, oh my God, like, I don't even know what you just said. But, and so what I've done is working with some of our leadership in the New York offices, we created a course called Health Farm, which is a 13-week course designed to help people who are interested but don't know anything, just the basics, so that it takes away the like intimidation factor, and it talks about how does a molecule become a drug, how do you get through medical legal review, all just the basic stuff that you have to face. And once that's gone, then you're just free to think of great ideas. So we started that, and we actually just ran it during Creative Month with the One Show for everyone, because my goal is, I was doing it for us at McCann, but my goal is to do it for everyone, so that any person who's interested in working in health advertising can get rid of that intimidation and just get in and do it. So I think it will become one. Yeah.
That's so interesting, man. That's great. Okay, so the last question. I see the shore, and here's the question we ask to all our guests. If there was a wind that blew your sail and you had to name it, what would the name be?
I don't know if there's ever been a wind named it, but I think the wind that blows my sail is curiosity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm very, I've been running for more than 15 years, something called Curiosity Sessions, at which I do them. In every agency I've been, I kind of bring them and we do them. We're now doing them around the world within all of our offices. We do at least, there's like 3 or 4 a month. And what I try to do is bring in someone who I don't know anything about what they do, or, I've had some amazing people like, I don't know if you saw that musical Avenue Q on Broadway. So I through a friend, I was connected with the writer and the musician who wrote the show. And I got him to come in and talk about creativity. And I'm like, because I was very interested in, like, how do you write a Broadway show? Like, I know how to write an ad, but how do you write a show? And he came in and sat for like an hour and a half. He brought a piano with him, and he sat and he talked about his creative process. And for me, I just learned so much from just hearing him talk about creativity. And I do that with all sorts of weird people. We had a scientist come in. We just recently had an astrology photographer come in who captures those incredible images in space. And so I think curiosity is such a joyful thing, and it kind of stops you from being intimidated by anything that you don't know. Like if you don't,
most like natural thing we have. We were born with question marks. I don't think as a human being we would ever put question marks in a closet. They were always there, right? I think the when you first start speaking, probably, I mean, I remember like the question I used to ask my mom when I was 5 years old, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Kids, like, you know, kids are questions. Kids
And
are
the
what
things that you can learn are
yeah.
amazing. I actually did a speech one year in Cannes about 4 or 5 years ago with Brian Grazer, who's the film producer, Ron Howard's partner. And he'd just written a book called About Curiosity. And he similarly, he used to do, every 2 weeks, he has a sort of a phone call or a meeting with someone that he's curious about. But he had stories beyond mine, but he talked about he'd been trying to meet with Michael Jackson for many years, and just to get to know him, you know.
Wow.
And he would cancel and then one day he got a call at the office saying Michael can meet with you and he'll be there in an hour. He's like, fuck, okay. So Michael Jackson comes into his office, and apparently he's like fully dressed as Michael Jackson. He's got the hat, the clothes, he's going through his glove stage, the whole thing. And Brian was saying he wanted to talk to him about songwriting and the process, but he said he felt like he was hiding behind the persona of Michael Jackson. So he thought, screw it, I'm going to ask him to take off the glove, which is kind of a bold thing to say to Michael Jackson. He said, would you take the glove off? And he sort of took his hat and his glove off, and apparently he became himself. Like he sort of let go of the person that he was trying to be, and he said they spoke for the next 2 hours about how he wrote this song and that song, and I was like, that is what an amazing story about just being curious and confident enough to try and get inside someone's head. And I was like, so that's what I try and do as often as I can. But I unfortunately can't get the likes of Michael Jackson. But
that's beautiful. Hey, Matt, thank you so much. Look, I really enjoy every second. You had some amazing stories, and I wish you all the best to you, your career. I mean, I don't know if there is any area that you can go, but yeah, I think you probably
maybe just longer. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit longer. Anyway, thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
Bye-bye.